voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
With us to start the show today, Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier is here. Grew up in Destin, Florida. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. You're a Florida graduate, University of Florida. You ran track for the national champion Gators. You are a graduate of the Georgetown Law School, and you were appointed Attorney General of Florida by Governor Desantis in February of 2025. Before that, you were Chief of Staff to Governor Desantis. So let me start by asking you about a national issue. Right now, we have Democratic officials across the country. Some are governors, some are mayors, some are attorneys general, some are members of Congress. We have even some local law enforcement saying that federal laws cannot and should not be enforced in certain jurisdictions. We've seen this in Minnesota, Oregon, Philadelphia, and other places. As an attorney general, what is your response to that?
Their position is ridiculous. I mean, it was not that long ago that when Florida wanted to carry out more immigration enforcement in the Biden administration, these same officials said, no, you're preempted by the federal government. You don't have authority here. Now that the federal government wants to actually enforce the law that's validly on the books, they say, no, we have the ability to do whatever we want at the local level. This is wrong. It's morally wrong, and it's legally wrong.
Let me ask you a question about the Minnesota case. Obviously, Renee Good was shot by an ICE agent, and there's a lot of discussion about what kind of an investigation there ought to be. I'm going to ask you two questions, and again, I know you haven't investigated this personally, and there may be evidence you haven't seen. There's really two things going on here. Number one, from your eye as an attorney general, is the ICE agent, Agent Ross, in the clear as it relates to his use of his weapon in defending himself against this attack from the Good who was in the vehicle? And number two, do you believe an investigation is warranted into the people and the organizations that are training people like Renee Good to go and not just protest ICE operations, but to actively impede federal law enforcement zone situations, investigations?
Sure. Well, first of all, law enforcement doesn't have to stand there and wait until they're injured or at worst killed to step in and take action. Here in Florida, when we've seen threats of harm and efforts to hurt ICE agents and law enforcement officers that we want here that are protecting our sovereignty and our citizens, we stand by them and protect them. We even have a program where our state police will go and survey and protect the home of an ICE agent if their name comes up in one of these chat groups or organizational efforts to intimidate and thwart federal investigative efforts. We believe at the end of the day there are some very malicious, well-funded organizations behind a lot of this. I think it should be investigated. I think there could be RICO considerations at play where people are funding efforts to go and ultimately wreak havoc and cause harm. And it needs to be ended.
Just as a public service announcement to anyone within the sound of our voice, should you, as an American citizen, get in a vehicle and drive into an active law enforcement situation and try to get in the middle of it, insert yourself into the middle of it? Is this a good idea?
This is not a good idea.
Terrible.
These people are doing their job. They're enforcing federal law that is not in question. So stay away, let them do their job, and if you want to engage in political antics that may get somewhat violent, you have to expect the worst.
All right, let's talk about some things going on in Florida with your agenda here, Mr. Attorney General. You have been outspoken about your view that the insanity defense in criminal cases is often misused. Can you talk to our listeners about why this is a problem and about how Florida, under your direction, is rethinking these cases?
Sure. Well, it is a big problem. We had a case just a few months ago where we found out somebody was released from prison in Kentucky, an individual that went into the room of a 5 or 6-year-old boy, a total stranger, broke into his house, stabbed him in the head multiple times, killing him in brutal fashion. This individual was concluded to be insane, lacking mental capacity, and was given a lighter sentence as a result. I think a 20-year sentence, and then was released on early good behavior after just 8 years. 8 years of time after brutally murdering a little boy. He fled to Florida. Thankfully, we caught it right away. We picked him up on a parole violation and sent him right back to Kentucky. But it did catch our attention. The insanity defense is abused by criminal defense lawyers to get people off for crimes where they need to be held accountable. So look, do you need to spend all of your life in a dangerous prison if ultimately you're found to be insane? I think that's a hard legal thing for us to do, but you certainly shouldn't be allowed out early. So we're going to adjust it where the insanity defense can be used for how you are detained, whether it's in a mental institution or clinical setting. That avenue could be allowed, but we're not going to just let people go. And just 2 weeks ago, right around Christmas, a guy randomly walked into a Barnes & Noble and brutally stabbed and killed an elderly woman that was there. Again, total stranger. And I already see the criminal defense lawyers talking about an insanity defense. We need to change the law here in Florida where people that do dangerous things are kept away from our kids.
And the Florida legislature has come to town this week for their annual session. This is legislation you'll be pursuing.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about another issue. You've been really aggressive since you became Attorney General on picking up registered sex offenders, people who have abused people in these settings. And you are promoting something called the Protecting Kids from Predators Pursuing Parenthood Act, which would prevent registered sex offenders and animal abusers from obtaining children through a variety of means. Tell us about this bill, why it's so important.
Well, it seems like something we shouldn't have to pass a law to protect against it, but the reality is in today's world we do. In Pennsylvania, two homosexual individuals recently promoted in exciting fashion that they had adopted a little boy. One of them is a registered sex offender. We've seen situations in Georgia, California, where individuals, oftentimes homosexual men, will obtain young boys and subject them to the cruelest of abuses for years. Having a child, we shouldn't have the commoditization of children. We need to ensure healthy, safe environments. And so at the end of the day in Florida, if you are a registered sex offender, you do not have the ability to go obtain a child through adoption or surrogacy. These programs are often abused. And the same with animal abuse. If you're going to go and harm animals, you should not be able to just go down and pay for a child.
One more thing before we let you go, Mr. Attorney General. You've been a promoter of something called Missy's Law, which is named after a real crime victim here. Tell us about that law and how it's exposing gaps in Florida's criminal justice system.
Sure. Yeah, this is another common sense initiative to protect against judges that abuse their discretion to let heinous people walk free. It's named after a poor young girl, a 6-year-old girl here in Tallahassee named Missy. The defendant in the case was convicted of child abuse, and while he was awaiting his sentence, the judge let him go free on bail. During that time of freedom, he murdered young Missy in terrible fashion. So we want to cut this loophole, take away this discretion from judges. That judge should be disqualified from office. That was a severe abuse of discretion, and we want to tie up this loophole across the state.
Yeah, it seems like we've got an epidemic of local judges and some local prosecutors across the country who are just determined to let very, very violent people out on the street at any cost. And of course, the cost is very deep for our society. That is Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier. Great job. Tough on crime prosecutor here in the state of Florida. And we're in your office today broadcasting the show. We appreciate you stopping by.
Happy to do it. We got record crime lows here for a reason. We're going to prosecute to the fullest.
When we come back, we're going to check in on the latest breaking news. Governor Desantis stops by at the bottom of the hour. It's Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is with you here on Salem. Stay with us. Hey, it's Scott. Listen, when I prep for my CNN debates, I need to know exactly where the national conversation is headed. And it turns out it's helpful to know that in your everyday life as well. And that's why I tried out Free Spoke. Now, it's my go-to place for search and for news. When you use Free Spoke, it's a search platform that gives you the full story. You get information from the left, you get it from the right, you get non-mainstream, you get independent journalists, you get podcast insights. What you get from Free Spoke is the full story all in one place. And here's the thing, when you search on Free Spoke, you know they are not going to sell your data. It's quite something, actually. It's fast, it's private, it's unbiased. Free Spoke helps me research topics and make sure that I understand the full picture. You can have this tool as well. Just go to freespoke.com/Jennings to download their app for free. And as an exclusive for my listeners, use promo code Jennings after you download it and get 35% off the premium version. You go ad-free and you unlock deeper elite tools to have control over your information. So don't rely on incomplete information. Take control of your own information environment. See every perspective so you can think for yourself, just like I do before every debate.
You've heard the narratives. Now get the truth. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
On the road with Scott Jennings, Wednesday, January the 14th. We're in the free state of Florida. We are inside the Florida state capitol, and coming up in just a few moments, Governor Ron Desantis is here. First, a quick check on the news. The world continues to wait and watch for any decision from President Trump on Iran. He is again threatening to hit the regime in some way if they start hanging protesters. Of course, thousands upon thousands of people in Iran have already been slaughtered. The vibrations over there are that people are expecting military action from the United States and expecting it soon. Some diplomatic evacuations have already been ordered. European sources telling news organizations they expect it. We'll keep an eye on that. Also in the Middle East, presidential envoy Steve Witkoff has announced that the U.S. government is moving into phase 2 of the president's peace plan for Gaza. Witkoff says we're moving from a ceasefire to demilitarization, technocratic governance, and reconstruction. The key issue here, full demilitarization. Will Hamas ever lay down arms? Hopefully, yes, but we have to remember who we're dealing with here. Minneapolis, update on the condition of the ICE agent involved in the Renee Good shooting last week. Agent Jonathan Ross suffered internal bleeding to the torso following the incident. This is according to officials briefed on his medical condition, coming from CBS News. Internal bleeding for Agent Jonathan Ross. Even as Democrats and other screeching pundits continue to say on TV that he was not hit by the car. Internal bleeding, sounds like he was hit to me. Staying with the Department of Homeland Security, a political vigilante inside the department has leaked to the internet thousands of names of ICE agents to the public. The data includes names, emails, telephone numbers, roles, and some resume data, including previous jobs. This, of course, endangers ICE agents even further than they already are, and believe me, they are in danger. There are people out there who want ICE agents to face assault or even worse. Why? For enforcing existing laws? It's political vigilantism, and it is not good, folks. It's not good. President Trump with a big announcement last night. All federal funding for sanctuary cities will end as of February 1st. Here's the president.
No country can afford to take in millions of people, pay for their education, their health care, their hospitals. You just can't do it. And we all have a heart. You can't do it. But many of those people are murderers. They're people released from jails, prisons, mental institutions, insane asylums. They're people that are drug dealers. They're addicts. Additionally, starting February 1st, we're not making any payments to sanctuary cities or states having sanctuary cities because they do everything possible to protect criminals at the expense of American citizens, and it breeds fraud and crime and all of the other problems that come. So we're not making any payment to anybody that supports sanctuary cities.
On top of that, President Trump is clearly outraged about the massive fraud scandals exploding in Minnesota and elsewhere, and he says immigrants who break the law will pay the price with their citizenship. More of the president.
We're also going to revoke the citizenship of any naturalized immigrant from Somalia or anywhere else who is convicted of defrauding our citizens. We're going to get them the hell out of here fast. And if you come to America to rob Americans, we're throwing you in jail and we're sending you back to the place from where you came. We're throwing you right in jail.
And this just into the show from the U.S. State Department. state is pausing immigrant visa processing for 75 countries in an effort to crack down on applicants deemed likely to become a public charge. The countries include places like Somalia, Russia, Afghanistan, Brazil, Iran, Iraq, Egypt, Nigeria, Thailand, Yemen, and more. Down in Venezuela, some good news. Political prisoners of the Maduro regime are beginning to be set free, and that includes some Americans. State Department officials say Americans are being released now. There are about 800 political prisoners down there. It's believed that a total of 50 people have been released so far. We don't have exact numbers on Americans so far, but hopefully we will soon, and hopefully there'll be more to come. And today at the White House, Danish leaders meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio to complain, I suppose, about the president's statements on annexing Greenland to be part of the United States. Coming up at the back end of the show, we have Congressman Randy Fine from Florida joining us about his legislation that would allow the president to make Greenland part of the United States. We're going to take a break here in Florida. When we come back, we'll be joined by the governor, Ron DeSantis, stopping by the show. It's Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is with you. DeSantis next here on Salem. We are waiting for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to come by. I know he was wrapping up a speaking engagement down the hall here in the Florida State Capitol. In the meantime, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the news today. As we discussed in our last segment, there's a lot of news and conversation going on in the public sphere about immigration. One of those things being discussed by Democrats in Washington, D.C., is that they are spoiling to once again shut down the federal government if there is any money for ICE and the Department of Homeland Security in upcoming spending bills. In fact, guys in the booth, let's pull up cut number 9. Here is Ilhan Omar. She says a great many of her colleagues are planning to oppose all funding for immigration enforcement. Here's Omar.
And so today, I am glad to announce that the Congressional Progressive Caucus has adopted an official position to hold ICE accountable. Our caucus members will oppose all funding for immigration enforcement in any appropriation bills until meaningful reforms are enacted to end militarized policing practices.
This is the next big thing. You are going to see Democrats, first from the radical left, like Omar, the Progressive Caucus, but slowly you're going to start seeing it work its way throughout the rest of the conference as these Democrats get pressured by their base of supporters to oppose any funding whatsoever for immigration enforcement, ICE agents, the Department of Homeland Security. So that's another topic that we're going to be following in Washington, D.C. The other thing that we're following today, and I want to talk a little bit about what happened at the Supreme Court yesterday, the conversation around transgender athletes. We discussed it briefly on the show yesterday. The oral arguments have occurred, and it was honestly quite staggering what happened in front of the Supreme Court, but it was quite revealing about the emptiness of the arguments of the ACLU and those who believe that boys should be playing against girls and that boys should be in girls' locker rooms and that your gender is whatever you decide that it should be. Let's start with an exchange that could have been the craziest of them all. Here is the exchange between the court and the lawyer for the ACLU. Gentlemen, cut number 2, please.
Girls.
Yes, Your Honor.
If it does that, then is it not necessary for there to be, for equal protection purposes, if that is challenged under the Equal Protection Clause, an understanding of what it means to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
Yes, Your Honor.
And what is that definition for equal protection purposes? What does it mean to be a boy or a girl or a man or a woman?
Sorry, I misunderstood your question. I think that the underlying enactment, whatever it was, the policy, the law, we'd have to have an understanding of how the state or the government was just understanding that term to figure out whether or not someone was excluded. We do not have a definition for the court. And we don't take issue with we're not disputing the definition here. What we're saying is that the way it applies in practice is to exclude birth sex males categorically from women's teams, and that there's a subset of those birth sex males where it doesn't make sense to do so according to the state's own interest.
Well, how can a court determine whether there's discrimination on the basis of sex without knowing what sex means for equal protection purposes?
I think here we just know that we basically know that that they've identified pursuant to their own statute, Lindsay qualifies as a birth sex male, and she's being excluded categorically from the women's teams as the statute. So we're taking the statute's definitions as we find them, and we don't dispute them.
Did you hear that? Listen carefully. The lawyer from the ACLU could not define what a boy or a girl even is, which of course is absolute lunacy when you consider that they were going to the Supreme Court to talk about these very things. Justice Alito is the other voice you heard there. He's correct. For equal protection cases like this, you need actual definitions of what you're supposedly defending. Now, these arguments got worse and more comical when Ketanji Brown Jackson got involved. And time after time, she tells us that she is perhaps the least competent justice in the history of the United States Supreme Court, with her comments and arguments and backs and forths. I think I finally understand the left strategy with Ketanji Brown Jackson. I think the plan is for her to act so dumb and to talk so much that the rest of her co-workers on the court just get up and quit, unable to suffer through it anymore. Let's listen to Cut 4, Ketanji Brown Jackson trying to talk in circles about these issues.
This notion that this is really just about the definition of who we accept that you can separate boys and girls, and we are now looking at the definition of a girl, and we're saying only people who were girl assigned at birth qualify. And
we spend a lot of time listening to liberals in this country toss a lot of word salads trying to explain what humans have known for millions of years. There are two genders. You're not assigned these genders by some random person. You are one of the two genders when you are born. Sort of dumbfounding that someone sitting on the Supreme Court can't even acknowledge basic reality, but as we recall from Ketanji Brown Jackson in Cut 6, here's what she had to say about that expertise before.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
That was, by the way, from Jackson's confirmation hearing. You know, it strikes me that we discuss the sports aspect of this a lot, but there's something greater going on here on the left that we really ought to discuss, and that is the attempt by the left, the attempt by the Democratic Party, and all these people who are in this cult to erase women from the law. If you cannot define what a woman is, how can you protect them? They are trying to erase women from the law. The so-called party of women, the party that defends women, actively engaged in trying to erase women from the law. If you can't define one, or if you say that anyone can be one, if I can just wake up today and tell you that I am one, you are erasing women from the law. This has profound civil rights implications. They try to make it about everything else. They come up with language. They come up with terms. They come up with all of this gobbledygook, at the end of the day, what they are actually trying to do is erase women from the law. And it's the conservatives on the Supreme Court who appear poised to expose this erasure and not permit it to occur.
Conversations and stories you simply won't hear from the mainstream media. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Live from Tallahassee, Florida, Wednesday, January 14th, Scott Jennings inside the state capitol here, joined by the governor of Florida, Ron Desantis. Thanks for having us here in the Capitol, Governor. I want to start with what's going on in Florida. You gave the State of the State address. Tell us, what is the state of the free state of Florida?
Well, we're I think the state that's made it happen. I was able to say 7 years ago when I took over to now, all these indicators have been positive: reduced debt, cut taxes, lower childhood poverty rates, better environmental stewardship, on and on and on. And ultimately, this is what we're here for, to produce results for people. So people talk about Florida going from a swing purple state to red. That didn't just happen because it happened because people saw the positive results of conservative governance. So it was a great way to highlight that and then talk about some of the other issues that we're doing. And then I did that yesterday. This morning, I appointed my 6th justice to the Florida Supreme Court. So out of 7 justices, I've appointed 6. When I became governor, we had a notorious liberal court. Remember Bush versus Gore, all this stuff. And I replaced 3 of the libs. And so now we probably have the most conservative court in the country.
And I've been going all over Florida the last few days. All anybody wants to talk about is the University of Miami. This is the first time Miami, a Florida school in Miami here, has won a playoff game. Is that right?
Since we've had the playoffs, Florida State got in it the first year. They got blown out by Oregon. Miami got in this year and first team to win. We were at the Texas A&M game in College Station, which was great. I will tell you, the smart money supposedly is on Indiana. They've done great, and they deserve all the accolades. But I would not bet against Miami. I think they're big, I think they're fast, and I think they're peaking at the right time.
All right, let's talk about a couple of international issues. Venezuela going on. Obviously, there's a big Venezuelan community here in Florida. I assume you're hearing from the Venezuelans here that they are ecstatic with what President Trump is doing. What do you think should happen next here? We've got Maduro in custody. Trump is dealing with what's left at the moment. What are your thoughts on our relations with Venezuela?
Well, first, the people, particularly in South Florida, are ecstatic. I mean, this is a long time coming. Chavez and Maduro destroyed the country. This was a prosperous country, and they totally screwed it up. And it's interesting, we did our little trip where we sent some illegals to Martha's Vineyard during Biden's tenure, and they were mostly Venezuelans, and people were telling me, oh, you're going to get hurt politically, you're running. And, those Venezuelans down there were high-fiving me. But why? Maduro was sending people to the border.
Right.
He was releasing people from prison. So they are so happy about that. Look, we've been in a fight in terms of our hemisphere, and I think what President Trump's doing, he's really reinvigorating the Monroe Doctrine. Think about before President Trump took over, you had more Marxist regimes in the Western Hemisphere under Biden than you did at the height of the Cold War. Colombia fell. Brazil fell under Biden. Obviously, Mexico's problematic. Cuba's terrible. Venezuela. Well, now, what? We've got an Argentina leader that's conservative. Chile just elected somebody more conservative. And now potentially having Venezuela move back to where they used to be could be very, very good. But this is our backyard. This is not just some far-flung thing. We have to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. President Biden refused to do it. Donald Trump is doing it.
Talk about the Middle East, Iran. We're waiting word to see what President Trump's going to do with the Iranian regime. We've got protesters in the streets. We have people being slaughtered. Do you believe the U.S. should go ahead and strike militarily to try to topple the Iranian regime?
Well, I think it's possibly, right? I think President Trump makes good decisions on these things. If we have an ability to help liberate a country that has been repressed since 1979 under Islamist totalitarianism, then you take that. Now he will be doing that. Obviously, there's risks involved, and he usually makes the right decision there. But I will tell you, there's been no regime in the world more consistently hostile to the United States than the mullahs in Iran. Think about it. They murdered Marines, 200 Marines plus in Beirut in 1983. They attacked the Khobar Towers. When I was serving in Iraq back during that conflict. Most of the casualties our troops were suffering were actually not at the time even from Sunni Arabs in Iraq. They were Iranian-backed Shia Muslim groups, terrorist groups that were doing it. So to be able to give the Iranian people a chance to have freedom, would be a huge, huge thing. And I think President Trump, you watch his statements, he understands the moment.
All right, we got about 20 seconds, Governor, before we end this hour of the show. You ran for president. You're back here in Florida. Your term as governor is coming to the end. Will we see Ron DeSantis back on the national stage in some form or fashion?
Who knows? I mean, look, I got to run through the tape. I mean, my view is I've accomplished everything that I promised the voters I would do. But you know what? If I'm playing with house money, I'm going to spend that capital. So we're going to work on getting the property taxes fixed for people, and we're going to work on a lot of important issues.
That's Governor Ron DeSantis here in Florida. We're live inside the state capitol. Hour number 1 is complete. Hour number 2 coming up. It's Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings, stay with us.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Okay, it's Wednesday, January 14th. Welcome back to Common Sense for the American people. Scott Jennings broadcasting live from the Florida State Capitol today. Down here for a few days, speaking to the James Madison Institute here in Tallahassee tonight. We'll look forward to that. Little breaking news. We have seen video of foreign ministers from Denmark and Greenland walking into the White House today. And apparently Secretary of State Marco Rubio is there as well. Something is afoot with the president's conversations about annexing Greenland. In fact, let's hear from the president. Here is what he said last night. Donald J. Trump, cut number 8, Greenland.
On Greenland, sir, the premier of Greenland said today, we prefer to stay with Denmark. Do you see that as the
Who
final
said
word?
that?
The premier of Greenland.
Well, that's their problem. That's their problem. I disagree with him. I don't know who he is, don't know anything about him, but that's going to be a big problem for him.
Do you want to see democracy?
Premier of Greenland. Let's not get too excited, by the way. They've got like 50,000 people there. It's a small town mayor in the United States. The real action will be in discussions with the foreign minister and the other government officials from Denmark. On the phone with me to give a quick breaking news update on this topic, Congressman Randy Fine of Florida joins us. Congressman Fine, thanks for taking a minute out of your running around on Capitol Hill. You have filed legislation that would allow President Trump to annex Greenland. Tell us about your bill and what your understanding is between the conversations going on here, Rubio and his counterparts from Denmark.
Well, thanks, Scott, for having me. Appreciate all the work that you do. Look, I want to stand behind the president, and I want Congress to stand behind the president. Fact of the matter is, Greenland would be a strategic asset to the United States, standing in between us and Russia, and we can't allow those trade routes to be misused by China and Russia. So I think this is an important thing to do, and I wanted to send a message that Congress is lining up to help the president. It's up to the president and the secretary to figure out how we get this done, but I did meet with the ambassador to Denmark and the ambassador from Greenland a few days ago. The challenge is that Greenland, as you pointed out, is a small town, 50,000 people, and they supposedly can vote to do whatever they want. So we can't afford to have China buy them off or Russia buy them off and align with them. We've got to be responsible for what happens in our hemisphere and to keep America safe.
There seems to be a lot of hysterics on the left and in the media out there about invading Greenland. It seems to me the President of the United States is a real estate guy, and what he's really talking about here is negotiating a real estate deal. Is that how you see it?
Well, I think that's what the president hopes will happen. I mean, he's basically saying we can't afford to have this huge piece of land come into the control of Russia or China. We saw in Venezuela what happens when an American ally goes south and embraces, as Mamdani would put it, the warmth of socialism. And then we have to go and we have to clean up the mess. We don't want another mess in Greenland. And again, with 50,000 people responsible for this huge territory, it's not really part of Denmark. They basically said they can choose their own path. And so we can't let these 50,000 folks stand in the way of making America safe.
We're going to continue to monitor this news. I know you have to run. Before you do, I wanted to get your response to a headline in the New York Post. The headline is, Trump to anti-Semites, you're not welcome in MAGA. See how easy that is, Congressman Fine? The President of the United States, once again, a beacon of moral clarity on this issue.
Yeah, and look, the president's great. Thanks for asking me that question. I'm the first Jewish Republican in the history of Congress to wear a kippah, and I wear it proudly. Appreciate all that you say. But in MAGA, we're rooting out our anti-Semites. Marjorie Taylor Greene quit. We got one more to go that I think the president's going to get taken out in a few months. Jews are welcome in the Republican Party. America stands with the Jewish people, not only in Israel, but around the world. And I think that's an important thing for the president to point out. He's the first president to have a Jewish daughter, and he pointed that out in the interview as well.
Congressman Randy Fine from Florida. Go back to work. Go back to Congress. I know you guys are running around up there doing stuff today, and you were nice to hop in here on this Greenland issue. Congressman Randy Fine, friend of the show, the Hebrew Hammer from Florida. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Scott. Say hi to all my friends in Tallahassee.
You got it, brother. Thank you very much. This just in, by the way, to the Scott Jennings Show. This is remarkable tape, and I want to make sure before I call for it that we can actually play it. There is a committee hearing going on in the United States Senate right now. Senator Josh Hawley. We got it, Sean? We do not have it. Okay. Well, there is a, hopefully someday we'll get it. There's a remarkable committee hearing going on right now. The Senate Help Committee holding its first hearing of 2026. Bill Cassidy is the chairman of that committee. Anyway, Senator Josh Hawley is up there, and he's questioning some witnesses about the risks of chemical abortion drugs. Legitimate conversation. He was talking to a doctor, Nisha Verma, V-E-R-M-A, and again, this just happened a few minutes ago, and they had this most remarkable exchange. This most remarkable exchange about one simple question. Can men get pregnant? Hawley was questioning this doctor. Can men get pregnant? And in the break here before we started this hour of the show, I was watching this back and forth. You have never seen someone work harder to avoid answering that question as this Dr. Nisha Verma. And we were having a conversation in the last hour about the arguments going on at the Supreme Court and what Ketanji Brown Jackson has to say about it. And then you see this Nisha Verma trying to answer this question. I want you to understand what we're dealing with on the radical left in the United States of America. The clip is ready. Watch this exchange. Hawley questioning Verma about can men get pregnant.
You just said a moment ago that science and evidence should control, not politics. So let's just test that proposition. Can men get pregnant?
I take care of people with many identities, but
can men get pregnant?
Many women that can get pregnant. I do take care of people that don't identify as women. That
can men get pregnant?
Again, as I'm saying,
let me just remind you what you testified to a moment ago. Science and evidence should control, not politics. So can men get pregnant? You're a doctor, I think.
Science and evidence should guide medicine.
Do science and evidence tell us that men can get pregnant? Biological men, can they get pregnant?
I also think yes/no questions like this are a political tool.
No, yes/no questions are about the truth, doctor. Let's not make a mockery of this proceeding. This is about science and evidence, and I'm asking you. You know, the United States Supreme Court just heard arguments yesterday at great length.
This is wild. This is absolutely wild. You can't get a medical doctor testifying under oath to the United States Senate to answer a very simple question. Can men get pregnant? That's all Josh Hawley of Missouri wanted to know. And this doctor could not, by the way, if this is your doctor, or if your doctor sounds like this person, get a different doctor. Because if they can't tell you whether men can get pregnant, I question whether they can tell you what's wrong with you. Do I have a cold? Well, it's complicated. I don't know. Do I have the flu? It's complicated. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with you that are actually complicated to diagnose and understand. One of those things is not, can men get pregnant? Of course, the answer to this question is no. But you see the extent to which politics has infected even medical professionals, people with training, people who went to school, people who probably went into massive amounts of debt to get medical degrees, have replaced all of that knowledge, all of that information, all of that time with this political indoctrination, this transgender cult that has taken over the left and taken over the Democratic Party in the United States of America. It is plaguing their party, and it will continue to do so until they learn to answer simple questions like, can men get pregnant? Or when we come back, we're going to talk about America's power grid. It's Scott Jennings here on Salem.
Ready for more common sense? Here's CNN's senior political commentator, New York Times best-selling author, and America's favorite political pundit, Scott Jennings.
Broadcasting live from Florida, inside the state capitol, common sense for the American people. Scott is here with you. By the way, a little more breaking news into the show. It sounds like Verizon is having some kind of major outage in the United States. If you have Verizon service and you're expecting a call, well, you may want to go somewhere else right now. Your Verizon's having a little bit of an issue. We'll keep tabs on that. Wall Street Journal headline: America's biggest power grid operator has an AI problem. Too many data centers. That's in the Wall Street Journal. On the line with us here at the Scott Jennings Show, Steve Everly, an energy and public affairs energy industry expert. He is a senior managing director of FTI Consulting. Steve, thanks for joining us. I assume you've seen this story about the grid dealing with these AI data centers. What is going on? What can you tell us about the grid and the data center impact?
Yeah, and that story is just one of many in a long line of stories about rising power demand. Estimates are all over the map, but really what you need to realize is that power demand is going up, and it's going up in a big way. It's being driven by data centers, by manufacturing, by a whole range of factors. And one of the reasons that's challenging is because for the past 20 years, electricity demand in the United States has been largely flat. So we're going suddenly, kind of cruising along, and now suddenly we have to stomp on the accelerator. And that's happening at the same time that you have or have had a number of closures of baseload big power plants, especially over the past 10 years.
Okay, let's talk about these data centers for a second, because on the one hand, we have the president and other national leaders saying we got to build data centers, we have to lead the world in AI and beat China, and we've got to build these things, and we got to have enough power to do this. On the other hand, we are seeing some strains, and we're also seeing some pushback in local communities here. Where do you think we stand on this? I mean, are local people right to be concerned about building all these AI centers as it relates just specifically to the power grid issues?
Well, look, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions to be answered there, and it's something that developers are still wrestling with. The land use issues and a variety of other things that are out there. The one that I know most about is the energy side of this. And when you look at any situation where suddenly you have a massive draw of demand on the power grid, people are going to wonder, what is this going to do for my power bills, or what is this going to do for everything else? So there's a lot of legitimate questions. I think what you're seeing that's interesting right now is that a lot of these large power users, including data centers, are actually making some direct investments in what's called behind the meter, basically bringing their own power to power their own facilities so they don't have to tap into the grid. The challenge, though, is that takes time, and whereas plugging into the grid can often be a much quicker solution. So there's a lot of kind of policy solutions and things that are working out right now, and we're all sort of experiencing it in real time.
Let's talk about what kind of sources we need to fuel our energy demands. Obviously, the president is putting a lot of time and effort into fossil fuels and also nuclear. A little more hostile to renewables. Don't talk to him about windmills. What's your view about how utilities should be viewing this? How should the American people be viewing it? What are the best sources? What's the best policy for sourcing our energy needs here?
Well, I'll give you a couple of bits of information here. A lot of the incremental power demand from data centers is going to be met by natural gas. It's the largest source of power of electric power in the United States. The amount of natural gas that we're talking about in terms of the additional natural gas demand over the next 5 or so years, just to meet the increased demands here, would be the equivalent of adding another top 10 natural gas consuming state. I mean, we are talking about enormous volumes of natural gas that are going to have to flow to these. So we need pipelines. We're going to need all of the infrastructure that goes along with that. And a lot of these companies are also investing in nuclear, as you mentioned, not just some of the newer advanced technologies, but also existing plants and even plants that had closed. For 70 years, just as a fun fact here, for 70 years of atomic power in the United States, there had not been a single case where a nuclear power plant had closed and then restarted. Over the past 2 years, we now have 3 that are in the progress of doing it. That is the scale of demand, and that's the scale of change that we're seeing in the power market right now.
That voice you're hearing is Steve Everly, an energy and public affairs expert. He is the senior managing director of FTI Consulting. The article we're discussing in the Wall Street Journal, America's biggest power grid operator has an AI problem, too many data centers. If you're interested in these topics, I encourage you to read the article written by Catherine Blunt and Jennifer Hiller. And I also encourage you to check out Steve Everly. Follow him on X at SA Everly on the X platform. Steve, thanks for joining us. Taking a break, coming back in Washington with Mariannette Miller-Meeks. Congresswoman from Iowa is with us. It's Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings is here in Florida. Stay with us.
He's the author of the best-selling book, A Revolution of Common Sense. Here's Scott Jennings.
Okay, it's Wednesday, January 14th. Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings live in Tallahassee, Florida today, broadcasting here from the state capitol. I want to thank the Attorney General James Uthmeier for giving us some space and stopping by the show. Also, Florida Governor Ron Desantis came by just a little while ago, and we appreciate his time as well. On the line, however, we leave the sunny confines of Florida. Well, you know what? It's not that sunny. It's cold down here, by the way, in Florida. But we go to the colder state of Iowa. Mariannette Miller-Meeks, Congresswoman of the 1st Congressional District, joining us here on the Scott Jennings Show. Congresswoman Meeks, thanks you for being with us.
Thank you, Scott, and I'm very happy to join the Iowa of the South.
I love it. Thank you. We have been talking today about, well, I'm just going to tell you, Congresswoman, we've been talking about utter nonsense. The first bit of utter nonsense I will bring before you and get your comment on is what we heard at the Supreme Court yesterday in the arguments about the transgender sports case. And then this morning over in the Senate Help Committee, they're questioning a doctor over there who just simply can't say whether men can have babies. So I'll just start there. Can men have babies?
No, sir, they cannot. And I know how difficult some people have with that issue because in one of our Energy and Commerce Committee hearings, and the witness for the Democrats had said that we just randomly assign gender at birth. And so when it came to my round of questioning, I asked her, this physician, if we assigned XY chromosomes at birth. And she didn't answer. It was a very long pause. And then she said, and I just said, you're a physician. It's a simple question. Do we randomly assign an XY chromosome at birth? And she pauses again. And finally, she says, no, we don't. And I go, precisely. We don't randomly assign chromosomes, and an XY chromosome gives you physical characteristics that identify a sex as a male, as a boy. And I can say, with all sincerity as a physician, it is not a level playing field when boys or men play in women's sports. The science and the biology is that men have longer striated muscles, so they run faster, jump higher. They have greater lung volume. They have greater cardiac volume, so they have more endurance. Those are biological facts. Furthermore, I would also say, when you look at what is prohibited in the Olympics and in world athletic meets, androgens are prohibited. That's a prohibited substance. So why, if you have natural occurring testosterone, which is within the androgen family, why would that be permitted if it's prohibited and you're tested for it in international sporting athletic competition? So to me, it is very clear. Men do not, belong in women's sports. They don't belong in women's locker rooms, and they don't belong in women's bathrooms. And we know biologically when you're born, with very few exceptions, whether or not your sex is male or your sex is female.
It must sound crazy back home in Iowa in the 1st District there when they see clips of these people coming before congressional committees, standing in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, incapable of answering very simple questions. What is a woman? Can men have babies? And yet it seems like an entire political party has been hijacked by people who cannot or will not answer these questions. What is going on with these Democrats? Why have they allowed themselves to be defined on this issue in this way? Do they actually believe it, or do they just fear the activists who have taken this on as a new religion?
So I think your question's interesting because if you remember when President Obama was president, and he talked about clinging to your guns and Bibles. And so he was setting up a whole new identity group for people that they would cobble together to win majorities. And so I think that they're very afraid of their base. We've seen what's happened to, reasonable people that have gone against them, the vitriol, the canceling, the you're not in my tribe anymore if you don't agree with me 100%. I mean, think of J.K. Rowling, for instance. So we've seen what's happened to other members, but we also know that after last election, that there were Democrats who came out and said, maybe, most famously, Gavin Newsom. Now, why would Gavin Newsom, living in, the governor of California, need to come out and say that maybe we've gone too far? And in the House, Seth Moulton. There are other individuals who have said, maybe we need to rethink this strategy. But it is catering to a small group of people. Scientifically, biologically, the number of people affected is very, very minute. But they have just created this issue, which is, as you say, it's far beyond common sense. I mean, the majority of people don't agree with it. You have centuries of biology and culture and society that would, argue otherwise.
All right, that's Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks of Iowa. We're going to experience some breaking news together here, Congresswoman Meeks, because the Danish Foreign Minister, Lars Rasmussen, has just come out of the White House. They were meeting there today, I think, with Vice President J.D. Vance and I think maybe Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The president wants to talk about Greenland and annexing it. Gentlemen, back in the booth. Let's play the Danish Foreign Minister, and then we'll get reaction from Congresswoman Meeks. Here we go. Rasmussen.
On this basis, we had what I will describe as a frank but also constructive discussion. The discussions focused on how to ensure the long-term security in Greenland. And here our perspectives continue to differ, I must say. The President has made his view clear, and we have a different position. We, the Kingdom of Denmark, continue to believe that also the long-term security of Greenland can be ensured inside the current framework, the 1951 agreement on the defense of Greenland, as well as the NATO treaty. For us, ideas that would not respect territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark and the right of self-determination of the Greenlandic people are, of course, totally unacceptable. And we therefore still have a fundamental disagreement, but we also agree to disagree. And therefore we will, however, continue to talk. We have decided to form a high-level working group to explore if we can find a common way forward. The group, in our view, should focus on how to address the American security concerns while at the same time respecting the red lines of the Kingdom of Denmark. We expect that such a group will meet for a first time within a matter of weeks. And then I will.
Okay, Congresswoman, that is the Danish Foreign Minister. Sounds like a little daylight there for President Trump's idea that we need control of Greenland. Where do you stand on all this?
Well, first and foremost, I would say looking at Greenland and remembering that when you look at a flat map, it really doesn't highlight how close Greenland is, where its position is vis-a-vis the United States and Russia. And so when you look at a globe and you look at a map that's a globe formation, you can see the strategic placement of Greenland, the shipping lanes, but it's not just that, it's rare earths, where there are nuclear arsenals, i.e. in Great Britain or in the UK, and then Russia's access and deployment of submarines and nuclear submarines all throughout the Arctic Circle. Then you look at the rare earth seabed mining, the minerals that Greenland has. And so certainly Greenland has long been of strategic importance to the United States. So I think what we heard there is that there is a willingness to get together to talk and make sure that the interest of both nations are respected. So I think, it's not infrequent that President Trump will say something far in excess of what he wants to get people to come to the table and negotiate. This is one of the tactics that he has used very successfully before in the past. And as I said, to recognize the strategic importance of Greenland, I think, is very forward thinking, especially when we have our enemies in Russia as an adversarial nation and China, and what China is doing both in the energy space and the manufacturing space, AI, ballistic missiles, hypersonics. So when you look at that entire spectrum, Greenland has increased importance to the United States and the United States security.
Yeah, it sounds like the talks will continue there, and positive talks at that. That's a good thing. I don't think the talks are continuing with Iran. It sounds like we may be on the brink of military action in Iran to support the people in the streets and to try to topple the brutal Iranian regime. Where do you stand on this? Should the United States engage and try to get rid of the Ayatollah in Iran?
For those of us that are old enough to know what had happened in 1979 or just old enough to know the history of what's occurred, this has been a brutal regime. I think that if President Obama had even given just the voice for support for dissidents and those people seeking freedom, as Ronald Reagan had done when it came to ending the Cold War, perhaps the regime would have already been overthrown and the mullahs would have already been overthrown. When the attack on Venezuela occurred, when we extradited, we had the strike and then extradited Maduro, I said at that time on January 3rd that this was a very Reagan-esque tactic and it would have repercussions and ripple effects far beyond Venezuela. And I specifically mentioned that the repercussions that would be felt in Russia, China, and Iran. And we're seeing that in Iran in full bore. This is not something that is recent. This has been longstanding. These protests have increased. We know dictatorial, brutal, authoritarian regimes do not work in the best interest of their people and their individuals. And I think the recent banking and financial crises in Iran has really propelled this. Right now, there are reports and stories of, thousands of individuals, protesters that have been killed in Iran trying to suppress this. But I think it's going to go far beyond that. Iran has asked for the U.S. support before in the past. President Trump said that he would support freedom-loving people of Iran. And I think you're going to see, not only with what's happened in Israel with Hamas, and then Venezuela, Maduro being extradited, losing Venezuela's support to Iran, and preferential treatment that with supplies and support of terrorism, that you may in fact see regime change in Iran. And longstanding U.S. policy was that we could not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So I do think that this is in concert with things that we have been supportive of and trying to get lasting peace in the Middle East.
Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks of Iowa's 1st Congressional District joining us live today from the U.S. House of Representatives. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your wisdom and thoughts today, Congresswoman Meeks.
Thank you so much, Scott. You all have a great day.
Fighting for free speech and Western civilization. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Okay, it's Wednesday, January 14th, home stretch here from the Florida State Capitol. I want to wrap up the show today by showing you what may be the funniest and or most racist thing you will see all week. Truly, one of the most outrageous videos to come from these broken-brained ICE protesters. This clip aired on what used to be MSNBC. They now call it MS Now. It's, well, listen to this. A man drove all the way from Wisconsin to guard a Mexican restaurant. Take a look.
Paul, you came in from Madison, Wisconsin. That's a long drive. Help explain to me why you're here outside of this business right now.
So I'm out here right now because this business put out a call for people to stand on this corner to watch the business for them. They've been really worried about reopening. They were shut down for the past 5 days after ICE was here, and they just aren't comfortable just doing this on their own.
And this is a Mexican restaurant and grocery store. And Paul, I see that you have a lot of equipment on you. You have a camera, obviously. You have another GoPro back here. You've got this acts as a whistle, you were telling me. And you've also got a first aid kit. It would be easy to understand why somebody wouldn't want to be coming out here to do the work that Renee Good was doing after she lost her life. But instead, you drove in 4 hours away. Why is it so important for you to be here right now, to be doing this work right now?
I have family in this community, so I was really worried about them. They shared their concerns, and they have a young son. They're not able to do this work. They're not able to stand here and watch over the neighborhood. So I'm here for them, for this community. This is what they need. They need to see people in this community out here supporting them, showing them that we are not afraid of this state-sponsored terrorism.
And the Trump administration...
If you haven't seen this video, I encourage you to look it up on social media. This man wearing his flannel, wearing his GoPro, wearing all of his improvised bat utility belt, drove 4 hours from Wisconsin to Minneapolis to guard the Mexican restaurant because I guess he assumed that's where the illegal immigrants are. This is the most racist thing you could possibly do. And that's what this guy did. The crazy thing is, he and so many of these other ICE protesters are claiming that ICE is out snatching up random people, random Americans. They say this all the time. I hear this at the debates I have on CNN all the time. They say, oh, they're grabbing up Americans, disappearing American citizens. Let me give you some data, by the way. 170 American citizens have been temporarily apprehended or detained. 170. Did you know that they have deported 622,000 people? 170 temporary apprehensions or briefly detained Americans versus 622,000 successful deportations of illegal aliens. The success rate here is astronomical. 99.999 something percent. You do the math. I'm only moderately good at math. This is like the most accurate and successful profession out there. If you're doing something right, 99.99 whatever percent of the time, they're not deporting Americans. In very limited cases, they have been briefly detained and then released. But the core tenet of all of this is that the left wants to brainwash and radicalize people. So they have to make up stories and tell them stories. Americans are being disappeared. I heard Jacob Fry say yesterday, they're dragging pregnant women through the snow. None of this is happening. This is simple, normal immigration law enforcement. But they tell people lies, they spread propaganda, and it causes morons like this idiot from Wisconsin to drive 4 hours in his flannel shirt because he needs to guard the Mexican restaurant in Minneapolis. And somehow that protects his kinfolk who were there, who, by the way, are not illegal aliens. It's a bunch of gobbledygook, folks, but there are real-life consequences. That's it from the Florida State Capitol. Thanks for joining us. We'll be here tomorrow. Scott Jennings on Salem. Thanks as always.
Common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.